So the same thing with all sin are evils, but they're lacking something to be there. So let's get down to the Second Vatican Council. Why would Our Lady refer to the Second Vatican Council as evil? Well, let's look at the fruits of the Second Vatican Council. What does the council give to us? At the end of the council, they produced documents. They're called the council documents. They have constitutions and dogmatic decrees, and although they call them dogmatic decrees, they're not really dogmatic. But all the same, there's these decrees. There's 16 council documents. That is the result of 4 years of work of these theologians and bishops and cardinals and pope meeting, and then they signed and said, we, the undersigned, proclaim such and such. So the problem with these documents is that they are unclear. Now, what difference does that make? Well, the whole point of having a council is to teach something clearly. So let's talk about a legal document for a moment. If you and your friend, let's call them Mr. A and Mr. B. If Mr. A wants to buy Mr. B's car, and they want to draw up a contract, or they want to buy his company, or they want to buy something, one wants to buy, the other wants to sell it. So they ask a lawyer to draw up the contract so it becomes clear what A is parting with and what he's receiving in return, and what B is parting with and what he's receiving in return. But now if the lawyer is a good lawyer, he'll make the document, is this what you want to do, Mr. A? That's exactly what I want to do. He writes it down in such a way that it's understood unequivocally. It means only one thing and one thing only. And Mr. B, is this what you're willing to part with? Is this what you're going to get? Yes. So he writes the contract in such a way that it's absolutely clear what each person is giving and what each person is receiving in return. That's a good contract. But it's good because, among other things, it is clear. But now, if the lawyer in the same question wrote such a lousy document that Mr. A thought he was getting something and Mr. B thought he was getting something else, and they're both arguing with each other afterwards, well, no, I agreed to, no, I didn't agree to that. Well, what's wrong? Well, the document that was written was evil because it lacked something that should be there, namely clarity. And so, the Second Vatican Council's documents, I think we can say this unequivocally, that they're not clear. How is it that after this teaching that things become more confused than before this teaching? Because the documents themselves are bad, because they're lacking clarity. And so, what does that mean? It means that's the fruit of the council, therefore the council that produced them is evil, because evil fruit doesn't come from a good tree. That's how we know the council is evil, because of its fruit, and the fruit is evil. And that's simple enough. So, what are we bound to do with the council? Well, in fact, that very question was asked at the Second Vatican Council. In fact, they asked Archbishop Felici, who later on became cardinal, but he was at that time the head of the Theological Commission, who was asked to make this clarifying note. And so he gave this note. In fact, it was so good that Pope Paul VI included it as part of the documents. Although a lot of people don't know that, and that's been hidden from the public by and large. But that's a fact. Archbishop Felici's clarifying note is part of the documents, in which he says very clearly, whatever the council taught, which has been taught before by the church, of course we must hold on to it because that's the teaching of the church. But whatever is new, he said, we must be cautious. That's the teaching of the council. And that's why we cannot embrace everything in the council, because there are some novelties in there that are contradicting what was said before. So I'm not contradicting the council. The council is not contradicting me, because I'm going by the nota previa of Archbishop Felici, which Paul VI made his own, made part of the council documents. And a document doesn't become real unless it's signed by the Pope. And the Pope said, I signed this on the basis of this note going into the documents. That's why I have no reason for saying that I'm contradicting the council, because I'm saying what is novel, we have to be cautious about. And if we have to be cautious about it, then it's not part of something that they can tell me to embrace. Hopefully that understands, it makes this very simple. It's a very simple question, ultimately, when you get all the issues together. And that's why we can believe and follow Our Lady of Fatima. Contrary to Cardinal Bertone, when Our Lady says the council is evil, the council is evil. Are there some good things in the council? Definitely, because it repeats a lot of Catholic doctrine. But about 5% of it is, now some was written ambiguously, some was written equivocally. Now, what's the difference between ambiguously and equivocally? Well, some was written quite clearly. It does affirm that Jesus Christ is true God and true man. It does affirm in the footnotes that the Catholic Church is the only true church. However, you can't find that in some other places, quite equivocal elsewhere. But when it comes to ambiguous, means that it could be taken in various senses. Does it mean this or does it mean that? But equivocal is very dangerous, because equivocal says it can mean you say one thing and the person A understands it in the exact opposite sense of person B. That's equivocal. And there are equivocal statements in the Second Vatican Council, as there are certainly ambiguous statements in the Second Vatican Council. And that is why we have to be on our guard against the council and against those who say the council, the council, the council. I'm sorry. I don't care if it's a cardinal or a pope that says the council, the council, the council. It's not, some of the council is contradictory to what the church has always taught. Except that it's novel, and therefore we must be careful, and therefore we can just ignore it, as we're supposed to do in the first place. And that reminds me of a council that took place in the Catholic Church, only one other before. It's in 553 AD, in which even 40 years later, there were some bishops who had problems of conscience of following this council of 553. And Pope St. Gregory the Great, here you have a pope, truly a great man, who told these bishops, say, just pretend it never existed. Just ignore the documents as though they never took place and carry on and be in good conscience. And that's what we need to do with Second Vatican Council. And now there are voices coming forward, very intelligent men, very learned men coming forward and saying something similar. It's important for us to have the council in proper perspective. Yes, it was called legitimately, but what most people don't even know is that it was under a constraint from the beginning not to tell the whole truth. We can talk about that another time. And it talks, Our Lady of Fatima talked about this too. God bless you. We'll talk about the council in our next session. God bless.